session is Intro to Data Axle, and which is one of the databases available for state employees through KDLA's website. So kind of a quick overview first about what Data Axle is. They have multiple databases inside of Data Axle. They are not just like one singular database. They're organized by business versus consumer, and then some subdivisions within that. And they also have a lot of historical data as well. They've been saving their annual databases since the late 90s. So this is kind of some of how they advertise themselves, that they have household consumer data, addresses, business ownership, contact information for businesses and as well as individuals, business locations that can be sorted by a variety of different subdivisions, and then, as we mentioned, historical data as well. And so you can use multiple filters to kind of filter down to what exactly you're looking for. These are their numbers. They have different numbers depending on which particular page of their website you're looking at, but almost 20 million businesses that they have in their database, 250 million plus consumers, 165 plus million households, and over 110 million homeowners. So lots and lots of information. Of course, these numbers are for all of the US and may include parts of Canada, depending on which database they were describing with these numbers. But just on the whole, a lot of information available at your fingertips. So kind of a quick overview of how you would get to this in the first place. So this is a screenshot of the KDLA homepage. And so if you look up at the top there, hold on. So if you look on the homepage here, if you look up at the top, there's a section for state employees, and that's where you want to go for the databases. And so you should have a library card. I know that when I was looking at the sign-up list, most of you all did. But if you don't, you would need a state library account in order to access the databases and log in correctly. So there at the bottom, there's where you can apply. And so then you can go over into the research database section, and if you scroll down, we have a multitude of different databases available, and down there you can find Data Axle reference solutions. Data Axle is actually rebranded several times, and up until within the last several years, it went by the name ReferenceUSA. So it's possible that you've used these databases before, but just known it under a different name. So these are some of the different databases that we have at KDLA that you have access to. And then in order to access any of these, you're going to have to pick the database that you want, and then you'll probably be prompted to enter your account number, so your library card number and a password. And if you're having any issues with logging in, don't know what your account number is, that sort of thing, you can contact the State Library Reference Desk. So again, this is what the option is going to look like for Data Axle. And this is what it's going to look like more or less to log in. So you'll put your card number at the top and your password underneath. And so once you get in and get logged in, this is what the homepage is going to look like. Has Data Axle up here on the top. We have access to the government division. So they have different versions of this that they offer to different customers. And so we have the government access version. And so you can kind of see that there's two sections here. There's the business databases and the consumer databases. And so then you can pick whichever one you want. And if you scroll down, it has a little bit more description on what each one of those actually entails. And we'll go through that here in just a second. And this is just what it would look like if you clicked on the consumer databases tab. So for US businesses, it's current US businesses. They update all of their business information at least once a year. So this is going to be fairly current. They actually call all the businesses that they keep in the database every year. And so there's a part where it might be a new company and it would have some unverified data, but they do have that also under the new businesses area. So it also in this description includes a short list of what some of the filter options you would have. That's not an exhaustive list. So then historical businesses, so you can look back at specific dates, maybe a business that used to exist but has been closed and you're wanting to know something about that business, who was in charge of it, that sort of thing. And you can organize it by year, or you can use a range for the time. And then they have a jobs portal that they pull information from, primarily ZipRecruiter, from what I understand. And then also new businesses. So this is where they add in new businesses all the time. And some of this information may or may not be 100% verified the way the main business database is, but this can be, if you know that you're looking for something new, this would probably be the best place to start. So then we're going to kind of go through the consumer databases relatively quickly as well. So there's the standard white pages, and so that includes name, addresses. It has some information on average home values, that sort of thing. And then consumer lifestyle, and this has more kind of demographical information. I think this one is the one that has a lot of more interesting filters on it. And then new movers, homeowners, so people who have moved into an area. So if you're looking for some information about somebody who's new to the area, moved recently, purchased a home recently, that sort of thing, this is where to look for that. And so now I'm going to go through and kind of show you a little bit more about how to actually use all of these databases. So you should be able to see the Data Axle Reference Solutions homepage. And so like I was saying, if you scroll down, it automatically takes you to the business databases as the default. And as you click on each of these, it'll pop up the brief description. And so if you go in, let's just go into US businesses for now. And to actually start using it, you're going to click on Start Search over here. And so just kind of for a quick example here, I'm in Frankfurt at KDLA right now, so we'll just use Frankfurt as an example. And Kentucky. And so if you notice here, we're under what is called Quick Search. And so if I hit View Results, it's going to give me every business in all of with a Frankfurt address. And so you can look through this. It gets you almost 3,500 results. And that's a lot of information to still sort through. Possible that it could be useful. If you look at it, you can have the heat map and it will, well, once it finishes loading, There we go. So once it loads here, you can kind of see that most of the businesses are centered around downtown type addresses. And then you can kind of see that they tend to kind of follow where the major roads are around Frankfurt. And so that can be kind of helpful if you have fewer, I think it says up here, less than 300 records at that zoom level, it turns it into pinpoints. So if we go down super, super close, it's thinking again. And again, just using downtown as an example. When you get close enough, it's going to switch over to little icons. So you can click on individual businesses, Buddy's Pizza, Pinnacle Point Frankfurt Condo, Pure Nutrition Bar. So you can kind of start finding where things are. And so that can be a helpful resource. There's also other ways to organize the information. I think this is the details option. Charts can be kind of interesting to look at as well. It does take it a second to generate each of these just because it's sorting through a lot of information. But you can see it actually lists physicians separately from a practice. And so a practice might have multiple physicians working there. And so that's why there's a lot of them, because they're all listed as individuals. And then, of course, it's Frankfurt, lots of government offices. But then you see restaurants, attorneys, churches, nurse practitioners, etc. And so it gives you kind of the top results. And then it gives you some counts down here if you want some more details. You can organize by zip code, and it can generate some reports for that. Depending on how big of an area you're looking at, zip code might be more helpful than in Frankfurt, where it's like, what, 95, almost 96% one zip code. They run some numbers off of comparing sales volume. I remember when we were speaking with them, they told us exactly where did they get those from, and now I'm blanking on it. But these are an estimation, if I can remember correctly, not exact numbers. Maybe the sales, is it the employees? I can't remember now. One of these is sales volume or employee size is an estimate based off of the other one, if I remember correctly. But still useful information. And again, you can go back to the results, but that's kind of a lot of information that's super general. I'm not sure for most people how useful it would be to have every single business in the entirety of the Frankfurt area. And so there's also options to download and print if you're needing to keep a specific result, a specific search. So if you click on revise search, it's kept what you already have, Frankfurt, Kentucky here. But now if you want to add in a specific company, or you know who works for the company that you're looking for, but where it gets really useful is to go into the advanced search option. And this is where you get a lot more filters. So again, down here, verified businesses is what it's searching right now. You do have the option to include unverified businesses. So it might be a newer business that they haven't gotten an opportunity to call yet. But if you knew that you needed, that there was a possibility you had some newer businesses that you wanted to add in, you could check that box. This top section is only helpful if you're looking for a very specific company. And while I'm sure you could use this database for that, it seems like aggregate type information might be the more beneficial way to use it. So there's map-based searches. You can search by city, state, which we should already have. Nope, looks like we lost it when we switched over to advanced search. So if we type in Frankfurt, and search, I apparently have caps lock on, it's going to give me all the Frankfurts. And so then you click on it and it comes down here. And what you see over here is view results, update count. So update count is going to take it down to just under 3,500 results, which is a lot more, which is what we had before. But if we want to start narrowing that number down, we could look at, where did it go? Keyword search. So if we want to look for restaurants, and it searches by these codes. And so if you know what code you want specifically, you can enter the code specifically, or you can search by the description. So I'm just going to go with the generic restaurants option, and then we're going to hit update count. And now we're down to 121 search results, which seems like a much more usable result for this specific example. So we're going to hit view results. And once again, we're going to have the same list to start with. And you have the same options for the heat map. And since we only have 121, we're not actually going to get the shading. We're only going to get the options for the little tags for each location. It's thinking again.
Now you had that one question about it. Was it employee size, where they get their information? I'm going to put that in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Well, this does not seem to be loading at this very moment, but you saw it on the last one. When it gets down real small, you end up with the little icons, and well, this is helpful.
Yeah,
it's a really interesting database. It has a lot of interesting information in it that can be very useful, but it does have to sort through a lot of information, and it just does lag because of that. Okay, we've gotten it to load again. City, state. I'm going to have to re-enter this. I'm not going to ask it to show the map and the charts again. You know what they look like at this point. But you are also able to click on the individual company name over here. And it should open up with information. So this is where you get very specific information about that specific organization. So this one is Applebee's. It's got the address there on Highway 127. Gives you the county, tells you that it's verified, contact information, that sort of thing. And then it has some of the other codes, the primary codes that they have. So restaurants, foods, carry out, and bars. And then there's more business demographics down here, hours of operation, business expenditures. Yeah, so business expenditures are the estimated annuals. So that's where the estimations came in. So that's kind of a quick overview of what all is on each of these. And so when you get down to, you found a specific organization that you're looking for, if you're not looking for like statistical information, like the heat map or the chart would be able to show, if you're looking for a specific business, and are just trying to narrow down because you know geographically where it is, but maybe you don't remember the name of it, this is where you can get to specific information. Let's look at Buddy's Pizza. We had that on the map a second ago, downtown. And so it's got, you know, West Broadway, also verified because once again, we weren't searching for unverified records the way we had the filters set here. And then much of the same information, you know, the primary is that it's a restaurant, 8 employees, hours that it's open, management, owner and manager information, and then some of the information over historical information on going back to 1997. So that's just kind of a quick overview of what kind of information you can expect out of these. There's also the corporation tree. So we'll go with Arby's for this one just because Arby's has lots of locations. And so you see here, Arby's, Frankfurt, restaurant, estimated sale volume, and then you can see who owns it, or corporate tree-wise, who the parent company is. So Arby's Restaurant Group owns it, and you would be able to click on them as well and get more information about that. And you can see that Arby's Restaurant Group is owned by Rourke Capital Group, private equity company. Both of those are in Atlanta. And so you can kind of see a little bit more information about that. And then you also can see, if we close Arby's Restaurant, you can see all the other companies that are owned by that same private equity company. So just kind of a quick overview of how you can find connected information that may not be what you may or may not have been what you were originally looking for, but could be useful. So that's kind of a quick overview of the business side. Actually, I take that back. We're going to go back to the home screen, and we're going to go into the historical businesses here for a second just to kind of show you where those options would be. So very similar layout, company name, city, state, phone number, but here you see that you have lots of options for dates. So we're going to go over to advanced search again. Personally, I like all the options in advanced search. There's relatively few in the quick search, in my opinion. So we're going to go with Frankfurt again, just because that's what we've been using. And then let's look at information from dating back to 2020. And then you see here that they don't have 2024's information into the historical database yet. But we're going to look at 2022, the most current information in this database. And if we hit update count over here, you can see how many records you're going to get. I'm going to go ahead and start narrowing this down a little bit more. Keyword. We're going to go back to restaurants just because nice, convenient example. So again, this is going to include businesses that have closed. Now this is not super relevant on this particular search, but they also include anything that's had an LLC filed. And so even if it's not necessarily a company with like a super big presence, it might be a small business, somebody working on their own, but they've filed an LLC, it will still be in here, even if it's not one that's going to have like, you know, your typical street sign out on the road. Again, for restaurants, that's not super useful bit of information. But you can see that the information can be sorted by the year for each one of these. And you can see how the name was referenced as Applebee's in 2020, but in 2021, it became Applebee's Grill and Bar. in that particular example. And then for Arby's, see if we can find something. Okay, so here's an example. Fusion Restaurant LLC here was listed in 2023, but did not exist before that. And so you can kind of look at some of these and see Gibby's Deli. Gibby's was not listed in 2023, but was listed before that. And so you can kind of get a feel for what was there and what wasn't when it was there. And again, you've got all the same options up here to kind of organize the information in ways that make sense to you. And if you don't want to start over on your search, don't hit the back button, hit revise search. Back button starts over and takes you back and reloads the page. The revise search keeps what you already have and lets you update it. And kind of a quick little side note, you do have some options down here to omit specific information. So if you are looking for all of the information in a city and you list the city, but there's like one zip code or two zip codes that you're trying to exclude, instead of listing all the zip codes that you do want, you could just hit omit over here. Or omit a metro area. So if you were trying to get information about Kentucky outside of, say, the Louisville metro and the Lexington metro areas, you would be able to just search for Kentucky and then omit metro areas. So again, not sure how everyone would be using this information, but just kind of trying to throw out some ideas of what the options are in this database. And then this one also has compare businesses. And so you can compare up to 4 businesses over 10 years. So you can search by a city, and then you can select up to 4 businesses. So let's see if we can find something that's not state government. Oh, I was looking for headquarters by accident. So this is the location type. So this gets us more options. So I don't know, let's go with dentist this time. We just found 2 dentists sitting next to each other, so that seems like a convenient option. So we're going to hit compare over here. And it's going to show you some information over time, sales volume, employee size. Not sure where this would be useful once again, but just knowing that this is an option if it was something that you were like, oh, could I do this? And it is here. Again, I'm going to go back to kind of the home page here, look at the business databases. Not going to go into the jobs and internships option too much. Again, it's similar searches. New businesses also very similar. Again, advanced search is my preference. There's also a map-based search. And you can zoom in on this map, kind of scroll around. In some ways, it kind of, this is Google Maps that it's basing this off of, you can see down here. And so it works much the same way as you're probably familiar with Google Maps working. And again, I'm just using Frankfurt because that's what we've been playing around in. And so you can draw a shape. You click. I don't know. And you double click to end it. Again, this allows you to hand draw the shape. There's also boundaries, and so you can look at like state area codes, and so you can kind of go with, you can look at where those boundaries are. And so you could pick all of Franklin and each of the surrounding counties, not Spencer. And so you could search that way. And if you decide that you don't want something, you can hit delete. Again, with metro areas, they're kind of organized that way. So just, you can kind of look at this and play around depending on what you're trying to do with it, and look at things on the map. And when you're done, you hit return to tools. Drive route, so you can look at driving routes on here. This one's kind of interesting, the define radius. So you click and drag to make the circle. And then if you want to, you can actually click and drag a second time, and you can exclude. So if you double click, it gives you options. You can exclude. And so you can actually look at a kind of a donut shaped bit of information. So example that was mentioned to me, like if you are trying to send out information about an event or something that's happening, and you know that everyone that lives nearby probably knows about it, but you're trying to reach the broader community around that area, you could find lists of businesses, people, whatever it is that you're, whatever kind of information you were trying to find. You could find organizations, contact information in other databases that they have individuals from a kind of donut shaped search area. So I'm not going to actually do the searching on this. It's going to give us lists much like what we've already looked at, but just kind of trying to show what this actually looks like when you're doing the map. So I'm going to hit done. And if you decide that you don't want it, there's a little X option so you can start over. But this is new businesses, and just kind of a quick, there's a lot of information in these databases, more than we could possibly go over in an hour. And so I know I'm moving kind of fast. So new businesses in Frankfurt, that's the only filters that we have right now, is the city, state, and then that we're in the new businesses database. And so there's 464 results. And so Swap Shop Kentucky, Rainbow Childcare. So these are relatively new businesses. They get this information from when LLCs get registered and that sort of thing. So again, if you're looking for newer businesses, again, I can't remember what department everybody works in, but if you were maybe in some kind of economic development organization trying to get lists of new businesses that you wanted to support, this could be a place you could find that kind of information. So that's kind of the business side of these databases, or information about businesses, let's put it that way. And then there's the consumer databases. So standard white pages, consumer lifestyles, new movers, homeowners. You click on the more information, you can research, kind of click on the more information and know a little bit more before you go into the database itself. We'll start with the standard white pages. It's set up very similarly to the business databases that we were looking at. Once you start looking at one or two of these, you'll find that a very significant portion of the options are going to be the same when you start looking over here, especially between the businesses tend to look like the other business ones and the consumer ones tend to look like the consumer ones. So again, you can do that same map-based search. You can do all of these different geographical areas. So let's do city-state again, just because we're not trying to get information for the other side of, other states. We're in Kentucky. We're going to put Kentucky in. I'm not going to select by state in this example, but let's say it's giving us example of John Smith here. So let's go ahead and just do that just because we need a name. So we're just going to look for anybody with the last name Smith in Kentucky. Well, that gives us 22,000 results. So maybe that's still too much. So we're gonna go with a first name, John Smith, just because random. Then we're down to 399. So again, similarly to how the business databases work, it's just going to have information about individuals rather than more publicly available type information that would be for businesses. And so we're not going to go too much more deep onto this just because that gets a little awkward. But going back to the home page, new movers, homeowners, you can search by city and state again. So you can look into results from the last 6 months, advanced search. So we can select Kentucky and then update count. And we can look at kind of the how many records are we getting out of these without even looking at the exact names. So it's saying that 146,000 people have moved in Kentucky in the last 6 months. So it can also tell you, you can sort by move distance. So let's say somebody that has moved at least 15 miles away, right? So somebody that's maybe moved more than just across town. Okay, we have to enter something in the 2 miles. So let's put so 47,000 people, almost 48,000 people have moved more than 15 miles and to move into Kentucky or to wherever they're living in Kentucky. And then time frame, again, you can sort ranges, that sort of information. So lots of options for what kind of information you're looking for to narrow things down. And again, we still have the exclusions over here. So if there's a specific area that you're not wanting to select, you can do that. And again, quick search isn't bad if you know the more specific parts of what you're looking for. So if you're looking for a specific person and you already know you're looking for a specific person, you can use the first name, last name to search here. And with all of these options, view results or enter gets you your results. And then if you started getting a bunch of things sorted out and you are like, wait, I need to just start over from scratch, there is the clear form option as well, so you don't have to go all the way back to the home page and find your way back in. So I saw the question about nonprofits, and I don't know right off the top of my head. Let's look around in the advanced search options and see what we can find. It's thinking again. I'm going to start with the keywords because I'm thinking that might be. Yes. So in the keyword area, you can search for nonprofit organizations, and I'm going to add in Kentucky just because we're in Kentucky. It doesn't seem useful to search for other states. So count, view results, 10,000 nonprofits in Kentucky that it's giving us. And it does default to sorting by alphabetically by company name or the individual's name. And so, sorry, lost my train of thought. And so if you're wanting us something specific, you might have to go through several of the pages here. And it'll tell you how many pages you're looking at. And so if you want to look at a very specific page number and you're like, I need something, and let's say you're looking for one in the M's, you can type here and guess and be like, I think I want to start on page 25. Oh, there's 406. I can't count. And look, that got us into the M's. So now you can kind of sort around. So even if you don't know exactly what you're looking for, if you'd be able to sort through a little bit more this way. And again, has the city state, if that's helpful. And again, you can click on any of these. And you can save a search and then use that as your omit. So if there was a specific kind of, if you were able to know that you didn't want something specific, but it's not one of the omit options, you can complete that search, save it, and then use that saved search. I don't have any saved searches at the moment, but you could use that as your omit filter. So that gives you a little bit more flexibility with the exclusions option as well. So, did anybody have any more questions? It was a good question about the nonprofits. It wasn't something I'd thought about looking for. Now, just kind of going back into kind of some general showing around, they do have a bar over here for new filters and how they've updated and changed things. And they do have some like answer your own question kind of options, FAQs. If you really want to know some information they have that's not in the FAQs about where they get their information or how to use something, they do have a contact us option. And then some just general information about them. We've kind of talked about some of this. But they do have other databases that we don't have access to. So we obviously don't need to have access to Canadian businesses, that sort of thing. And so just kind of mentioning that their databases even do go beyond what we have access to. There's a ton of information at our fingertips. And I think I saw another question. Can you download a list of results? And the answer is yes. So let me slide in here. We're going to go for Kentucky just to be fast here. Update count. Probably should have sorted by city too, because this would be a massive, massive list. And so download is an option. If you select over here on this little the selection box for everything, you should be able to get all of the information at once. And so it lets you pick what kind of file you want. Common delimited, Excel, etc. Tabs, and then how detailed of a file do you want? Summary, so a little bit of information, detailed, or if you know exactly what you're wanting and you only need like 3 of the fields, rather than downloading a ton of information you don't need, you can select what options you want. So let's say you don't care about the executive names, but you just want to have the name and the address and the record type, and I don't know, maybe the primary phone number. You could only only export what you're actually looking for. And then to actually download records is down here. I'm not actually going to do that since we don't need this, but yes, spreadsheets are an option. So if there's something specific that you're looking for, and you're not sure if it's something you could find in here, maybe you've looked around and are still not finding something, feel free to reach out to the reference desk with questions. And if it's not something that we can help with, we're happy to reach out. We have some contacts at Data Axle that we can reach out to with further questions. So there's a lot of information in here. I don't know necessarily how useful, how you would want to use it, because it's going to be different depending on what department you're in, what your job is, what you actually do on a daily basis, of what kind of information will be useful for you. But hopefully this has given you a pretty good overview of what's out there, what's in this database, that sort of thing. So this kind of wraps up what we had to present today. If anybody has any questions, we're going to stick around for a little bit after this. And these webinars are funded through the Institute of Museum Library Services, so we want to thank them for their sponsorship of this webinar. So if anybody has any further questions, feel free to stick around. I think we're going to go ahead and stop the recording here in just a second.